Nisreen Abdelmajid is a technical producer at AMI Audio and a producer on this show. How's it going, Niz?
Pretty good, pretty good. Excited for the second segment here.
Yeah, what are we looking forward to here?
Yeah, coming up in a few minutes, Ryan Hooey joins us. He's an avid audiobook listener who also is a regular contributor on Kelly and Ramya on his featured segment called The Chatty Bookshelf. He's coming on today's show to review the audiobook Eruption by Michael Crichton and James Patterson, two of the best-selling storytellers of all time that have created an unforgettable thriller. The master of the techno-blockbuster joins forces with the master of the modern thriller to create the most anticipated mega bestseller in years. A history-making, once-in-a-oceanic eruption is about to destroy the big island of Hawaii, but a decades-old military secret could turn the volcano into something even more terrifying. Now it's up to a handful of brave individuals to save the island and the entire world. Jacob, I know you're a big fantasy book listener, but how do you feel about thriller books?
When it comes to fantasy, I see it kind of as like a meta genre where all fantasy means is that it doesn't happen in our world or has magical elements. So there can be fantasy books with elements of what you would typically find in thriller. So that's why I'm a huge fan of fantasy, because you actually get a big scope of different types of genres. There's romance, there's horror, there's suspense, there's thriller. But this specific book is I don't know. I have complex thoughts. I think you'll just have to stick around for what I think of it. But
Absolutely.
it's in a funny subgenre of like disaster books, like environmental disaster books, which is typically what you would find as a movie. And that's one of the things I think both Ryan Hooey and I came out of this one, is that it kind of feels like a script for a movie. It really reads like it's begging to be made into a film. Niz, thank you so much. I hope you stick around for this review.
I will. Thank you.
That was Nisreen Al-Majid. She is a technical producer at AMI Audio and a producer on this show, and she was joining us from Mississauga. All right, I think we're all set for today's AMI audiobook review. More vents near the summit were being blocked. Mac wasn't sure how many. Only the volcano goddess knew that. Only she knew in this moment how quickly the increasingly combustible combination of steam, blocked gases, and solid lava, known as cinder, was rising up beneath the earth, ready to show them all that she still ruled the big island the way she always had. You're listening to AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski. That was a quote from Eruption by Michael Crichton and James Patterson, one of the most anticipated thriller releases this year. Ryan Hooey is a regular contributor to Kelly and Ramya, where he has his monthly Chatty Bookshelf segment. He brought this one to my attention, and today we're both ready and eager to get into this in-depth review. Hey Ryan, how's it going?
Good. And it looks like you're putting the blame on me that I brought this one to you.
Okay. I said I had mixed feelings. I didn't completely hate it, but I'm not gonna lie, they were. I have negatives to share. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
How about we start by sharing our TLDRs of our reviews, are too long didn't read or too long didn't listen, the short version. So if you were to write a written review of this book, what would you name the article?
You ready? Slow moving lava.
Slow moving lava?
Yep.
Slow moving, I understand. Lava, do you mean in the sense that it's hot
Just
and
because
fire as like a positive?
Just because it's the volcano, you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to, I was gonna say slow moving molasses, but I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I mean, we're talking about, well, for the majority of the book, we talk about a volcano, but it's just, I think we're on a lot of the same pages with each other here, but I I almost had the problem where I was zoning out at times during this book, just because it was a lot of backstory, a lot of banter, a lot of this, and like you nailed it on the head when you said this could be a movie script, because there's about 7.5 hours which you could definitely remove to make this into a blockbuster movie that's what, 2 hours long. So
Yeah, this
it,
is a 10.5 hour audiobook, and it
yeah,
does feel like there's like 7 hours of fluff. Okay, no, that's an exaggeration. I actually disagree with that. Maybe more like 5 hours of fluff, which is still a lot of fluff. That's almost half the book.
substantial, right? Yeah, and I mean, if you're gonna give me that, so I don't want to give too much away, but I love the disaster, the natural disasters. I love government and military conspiracy, and we have that, but they explain it for, I'm gonna round and say 5 paragraphs. I'm like, if you're giving me fluff, I want that backstory. I don't want, oh, this is how this person came to the island, and this is how they feel about the island. And we have a plan, but the plan might not work. Let's try a new plan. We have another plan. Oh, it's not going to work. We're going to try this plan, and we're going to mix it with this plan. We're going to do this plan. I get it, but that could be I avoided, or in one chapter, and like let's move on with everything, because like this is James Patterson and Michael Crichton. Let's blow the roof off this book, like especially with an exploding volcano,
Right.
like an erupting volcano. Like that's what I was expecting. You have two super giants in the author world coming together and mixing their style of writing, and this is what we got. I have to say I was a little underwhelming.
I think you said it right. It seems like it had all the elements to be a blockbuster, just a really amazing book. But I think it could make a great movie. It's just this story was not best told as a book or an audiobook. It is narrated by Scott Brick very well, I'll add, even though he's given some pretty mediocre dialogue that he has to recite once in a while. But he did his best with the material that he got. If I had to write the title of a review article, this is what I would call it: From Fizzle to Sizzle, a thriller that keeps its best for last, which the second half of that sentence kind of leads into what I want to talk about next. And we started with a lot of negatives. Um, what did this book do right? I'll start. I think the ending was very bold and it got my attention. It was a good ending. It was very satisfying, and the keyword here is bold. What did you think?
I would agree with you. I liked the ending. It's just I don't know if that payoff was worth sitting through the, let's say, 5, 6, 7 hours of the stuff before. There are scenes which are really good scattered throughout the book, and I have to say my favorite one was the beginning scene where the helicopter is being flown by the random person, and they have to go in and rescue them. This is before we've realized anything is actually really bad, but that scene was described very, very well, and I thought that was a really cool scene. Another thing that I thought they did well was they brought the natural island life. So I've never been to Hawaii, but I have a few friends that played some baseball over there. And some of the things that they mentioned in this book were things that they missed about the island, and it was natural, like life over there, kind of thing. Like some of the slang words and some of the things. And I loved when they were doing the press conferences and the locals were yelling at people that weren't from the island. And I don't want to use the name because it is a little derogatory, but when Scott Brick said it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is great. I got a good laugh out of it. So there was a lot of things scattered throughout the book or sprinkled throughout the book that were really well done. And you nailed it with Scott Brick. He's one of the best. I mean, he can make it sound great, and he did really well with everything and what he was giving. But yeah, some of the dialogue was like forced at times, almost, where it's like this person has to talk to this person and they have to have a problem with them, even though it has nothing to do with anything. So there was a lot of that, I think.
He did. Um, they did well with setting the book firmly in Hawaii. It wasn't just an afterthought. Like they clearly did a lot of research, like you mentioned, with the lingo and the different places, and even the mythology of volcano goddesses and how people think that the volcanoes will always provide for them, even though they are unstoppable, destructive forces. Before we dive too deep into the plot here, Nisreen read the synopsis earlier, but I thought it was a little vague. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on the plot so that the listeners can get a better idea?
Elaborate. Oh boy. Without giving any spoilers away here too. Okay, so we have the biggest volcano in the world, which is going to erupt, but we don't know when. Now we toss in secret military base, which we get about 5 paragraphs of an explanation of what is there or what they did there or what is coming there. And that's the problem. So now we fly in an almost comically bad supervillain that you love to hate into
Yeah.
kind of where to give their idea, and there's all these other ideas. And by the way, I'll just say my favorite character in the whole book is that general who has to choose which plan to use. I absolutely loved the way Scott Brick portrayed him. But and then you have these 3 people. You have our good guys who kind of figure out what's going on, but then is it too late? Is it not too late? Then we bring in another crazy plan, and they want to do this, that, and the other, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. But when it meets up at the end, is that's when you'll have some fun. Like you said, probably about what 3 hours left in the audiobook, give or take, and then that's when things start to take off. But if you can get to that point, you're in for a real treat because, like you said, it's bold. The ending is really satisfying, I guess, compared to the rest of the book. But you have to go through some of the, I don't want to say boring parts because that sounds so mean, but some of the parts that don't need to be there, some of those ones that you look at, screen adaptations of books that are clearly getting cut over first read. And a lot of that will happen, and a lot of that will take place. But the plot is good. I just think they got lost in the mud of trying to force things too much, a little bit at times.
Yeah, if you had to really like put the plot in like one sentence, the biggest volcano in the world is about to explode, and a number of parties are arguing and trying to figure out the best way to divert or stop the lava before it destroys a bunch of nearby towns.
Without telling anybody.
Without telling anybody, because there's a secret military base that's holding a substance that, if it was destroyed, would unleash a sort of virus that burns people from the inside until they become charcoal. We can't continue with this review without giving spoilers. So from now on, we're spoiling everything. You don't get a choice. This is a spoiler review. And we keep talking about the ending being bold. That's because they spend about 70% of the book preparing for the eruption. And when the eruption happens, everything they did doesn't work because the eruption is too big and almost everybody dies. That's basically the ending. It sounds anticlimactic, but it's also very like thematically consistent with everything that was set up previously.
And it gave me glimpses, and I know these are 2 completely different things, but it gave me glimpses. And sorry if nobody's seen this out there yet, but another spoiler, but it almost reminded me of The Departed, where almost everybody dies. And I'm just like, oh, okay. And I was shocked at times where I'm like, oh, that person, wow. I'm like, is he going to go? Is this it? Is this it? And it was, that kept me on the edge of the seat more than the leading up to it and getting to know this person. Like, I didn't really feel connected with any of the characters, other than the daughter who owned the bomb company from Houston, and I forget her name, but like she was just sassy, and I was like, oh, I like her. I can get behind her. She's a character that everybody probably hates. She's almost like the New York Yankees of characters, where she knows she's the best and she's just coming in there and she's gonna mess some stuff up, regardless if you like it or not, but she'll get the job done. And I was like, I can appreciate, I want more of her, less of some other folks in this story. But there was some, yeah, it was interesting. And the science behind it, I did enjoy that a lot as well. And that's one of the key elements that I think they did really well. But I mean, and I don't know if I could say they could have done better because it's pretty cool. Some of the stuff that they whether it's true, made up, or a combination of the two, I don't know. I'm not that scientifically inclined, but yeah, I think you've nailed the ending like bang on there with the. Almost everybody dies. I'm trying to go through. I'm like, who really survived? I'm thinking in my mind now. I'm like, is it?
But it's kind of a bittersweet ending because lots of people die, but they also prevent that virus that I mentioned from escaping, that was really what was going to cause the most damage if it got released into the greater world. That said, it begs the question, why were they keeping a secret cave warehouse that's supposed to house this deadly virus next to a volcano? Did they explain that?
That's the story I want. That's the story I want. That's what I was talking about when they kind of go into it for about 5 paragraphs. Give me a chapter just on that. I mean, even if it adds time to the book, cool. But give me a breakaway chapter where it's like back in the 50s or whenever that took place, where that virus was put there for whatever reason.
Right.
Give me that story. That's what I wanted to hear. And I was like, okay, you're hinting at it. Here it comes. Here it comes. And it's like, oh, we get an overview synopsis of somebody reading a classified document for 3 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs, and that's it. I'm like, this is almost a story in itself. I would really like this to be broken away and kind of gone a little bit more in depth on. Because you're right, like, of all the places, okay, I get it, it's an island, but that's where you're going to put it. Oh, don't worry, we'll think about it. It's someone else's problem later in time. Like I feel like we could have did. I just that's really what I wanted. You nailed it for sure.
There were a couple things about the science in the book that it felt like Michael Crichton and James Patterson did their best to give the science of a volcano, how you know it's going to erupt, why it's so violent, like where the lava comes from. Like they did quite a bit of explaining and sciencing in clunky dialogue scenes.
Mm-hmm.
But I find it made me feel dumb because I was having trouble understanding the science. And I feel like I'm a pretty good reader, and I don't know if it just went over my head or because it was poorly explained. And I don't have much more to add to that. It just, the science didn't really resonate with me like the science did in other science fiction books. Like I think about Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I don't know if you read that one, but the science in that book was explained incredibly well. And I felt like I understood everything about this one. But in this book, I just felt dumb.
That's a tough thing to kind of nail on the head, right? When you're talking about like science for something that you're not an expert in. And honestly, when they started telling me about the science of an erupting volcano and this is the lava and this is that, I checked out. I am a big, like, if you're labeling this as the next huge, biggest anticipated blockbuster, blow the roof off. I don't care how the volcano erupts, just make it erupt. And I mean, I know that's a very simplistic kind of view of it, but when you're sitting there and like you said, they're very misplaced. It's like in the middle of a dialogue, it's like, well, this is the science behind lava. Like, cool, tell me how hot the lava gets. I'm down with that. I need to know that. But after that, that's about the knowledge I want to know about the lava, other than, like, let's face it, it's going to ruin everything. We get it. We know what that is. You learn about lava and volcanoes when you're in like 2nd grade. I mean, you're not going to know it like the scientists should know it in the book. However, I don't feel like that's important. I mean, we got the gist. Okay, if the virus gets hot, it's bad. If it destroys the city, it's bad. If this explodes and goes over the walls, it's bad. Like we understand that. I don't know why we need to know, oh, we're gonna blow this up in the volcano, and we're gonna do this, and I was just like, that's where it was like overcomplication of the plans, and there was too many, and it's like, we're gonna try this and we're gonna try that, and I kept going back to that, and I didn't, but it's one of my cardinal rules that I don't like to do, but I was almost to the point where my finger was hovering over the fast forward button at parts.
Because there are fairly extensive scenes where they explain the science, and like there's like three people gathering around a computer screen analyzing like lava flows and seismic activity, and it's like I am partially interested, but if it just goes over my head, I'm just wasting my time. And because you're writing it in words, you have to be incredibly descriptive to make it worthwhile. And I think the best science fiction writers, what they'll do is they'll explain the science in a way that's actually relevant to the plot. So if you're, say you're like on a spaceship or something, and the engine breaks down, maybe the nature of why the engine isn't working anymore would be important to the plot so that you understand what they're trying to do to fix it. I don't need to understand the subparticle reasons why the engine is combusting the way it does, because it's not relevant. So you can stay relevant to the plot when explaining science. But that kind of applies to a lot of things when it comes to books, and it all comes back to plot and character. And I think if you're just adding science fluff for the sake of it, for doing a flex, for having more credibility, I don't know, it's like, why are you writing a story? Go write a textbook. And I know I'm sounding anti-educational here, but it's like, I'm reading a story here.
The part about the science that I enjoyed most was about, I'm gonna say, 10 to 15 chapters in, and I'm gonna be a little mean here, but the nerd figured it out, and they said, no, you're wrong, because he pulled all the numbers and did everything, and he figured it out. It's like, oh, book over. Like, if they would have used his plan, it would have worked. But it's just funny because that's every single movie and book ever written. It's like, oh, well, we're just gonna doubt this guy because he's an air quotes nobody. And I was just like, oh, this is the plan that's supposed to work, isn't it? Because it's about 15 chapters in, we're, let's say, a third of the way in, and it's coming up now. But it was really funny to me because I was looking back at that. I'm like, well, if we just would have listened to him, I mean, you would have been better off than you guys are now.
Although I feel like that kind of thing happens all the time, where somebody lower on the totem pole makes a very good point. It happens all the time. I want to talk a bit about the plot here. It was very characteristic of James Patterson in that it was fast paced, but it had a bit of an oxymoron because it was fast paced and somehow boring. I don't know how they managed to do that. But I also
think the best way I could describe it would be is it was a hurry up and wait. That's kind of how I felt, because it's like, okay, they're giving you all this, and it's like, oh, this is gonna happen next. It's like, oh, you give me a gun, it's going off, but it didn't go off until several chapters later, and I was like, okay, well, this is dragging on a little bit, so I understand what you mean by that.
When it did get to the ending, was it worth it? I think so. I think the ending was so good, it really made up for a lot of it. Like, we're going very negative here, but the ending was genuinely fantastic. It was bold in the sense that, in terms of its tone, it felt very Disney-esque. It had some cheesy dialogue and kind of cliche characters that were fun, admittedly fun, and like some very archetypal, like, arrogant billionaires. You mentioned that one character, Brett, he's like a billionaire philanthropist that travels the world in an effort to I don't know, improve his
just the biggest
brand.
Supervillain flex in his checkbook. Like, it was just it was so funny to me. Like, I'm like, oh, okay, so we have to have this guy in there. Awesome.
He was great. No, I actually really liked him. He just kind of showed up as an idiot that thought he could save the world with his billions. You know what he reminded me of? I'm like, this is Elon Musk. It's literally Elon Musk, as a character.
And do you know what I would have rather seen? And I thought about this after we had some of our initial chats here, and I listened to it. I went back and listened to a part, and I was like, for his character, I would have rather that been a woman. And I know I'm going to sound so sexist, but I think that would have added some extreme value to the book if you have this super villain billionaire that you know what I mean, like, hey, let's go flex our muscles and do this. Like, I was like that would have added so much for me. I think I would have I don't want to say related more with them, but I would have liked that character, or loved to hate them a little bit more.
Yeah, the fact that it was a man made it especially cliche
Cheesy. Yep.
as a plot. Yeah, but I was saying that the tone felt very Disney-esque, and then when the ending happened, there were some brutal descriptions of how destructive the lava was. And there's this one scene especially where there's a group of boys that are surfing, and as they see the eruption happen, they think they're safe to go in the water to like escape the lava, but the lava hits the water and just boils the water around them, and they all boil to death in the ocean. And one of those boys was an intern at the volcano observatory that the main character works at. So that was a little bit of setup there, and that part shocked me, especially that it happens very soon after the eruption. I was genuinely stunned. I did not expect that level of brutality.
That whole ending part, I really enjoyed that part. I know I'm going to sound like a psychopath for saying that, but I really enjoyed some of the descriptions because it flipped the switch, and that's what I thought the whole book should be like, kind of thing. Like you said, it was kind of vanilla up to that point, and then all of a sudden it's like a switch was flipped. And it reminded me, again, not to compare it to another movie, but the movie The Happening, where they have all of the death scenes in it, and they just get more and more crazy as the movie goes on. And I was like, this is actually, that, like you said, is the ending worth it? The more I think about it now, I was on the fence saying, yeah, teetering yes, teetering no, but I think you're right. I think it is worth it if you can make it there, because the payoff it's pretty big and pretty shocking. I know we've used that word, bold. It's pretty yeah, it's like you said, with the boiling water and everything. I really enjoyed that one, and then there was a few others, but there were, yeah, it was the switch was flipped, and they went into like adult mode.
Adult mode. It was very thematically consistent too. There's one quote that popped up quite a few times, which was a Mike Tyson quote. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that's very indicative of the story here, because everybody has a plan, and they're all arguing over what plan to use for how to divert this lava to save the nearby towns. And then when the volcano erupts, they all get punched in the mouth, and all their plans get thrown down the drain. And also, there are a lot of indigenous characters in the story that say things along the lines of, the volcanoes have always been there and they've always provided for us. Like, I don't need to evacuate. The volcanoes and the island will provide. Mm-hmm. And in the end, that does end up happening, because it's a nearby volcano's natural formation that in the seismic event ends up changing a little bit, and ends up itself diverting the lava right into the ocean, like threading the needle in between two cities and saving lots of people, even though like thousands of people died already. But it ended up saving the world because it diverted away from that military base that held that virus that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and you know what? That I never considered that until you kind of just brought it up again. And I know that's me overlooking an important part of the book, but at that point I was jacked up for the ending, right? I was like I said, edge of my seat. Not so much sweating, but like with that ending, I didn't think, like you said, everybody would die, right? But that's kind of how it happened. And now that you mention that, I might go back and listen again just to get that kind of aspect of it, because that's interesting that you got that coach in your mind. Hey, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. I just picture the coach giving that inspiring speech before you go out there and you win that trophy, or you save the world. But I mean, that would have fit this book as well too, if you have the cheesy speech like in Independence Day or wherever.
Yeah, it was entertaining. Like, let's wrap this up here. Do you have any final thoughts on this book? If you had to recommend it to someone, like, how would you do so?
I would recommend it, actually, just based on, because if you're reading it, you're probably a Crichton fan, you're probably a James Patterson fan. I think the story behind the story speaks more volumes than the story itself. And I'm not saying the story is bad. It just wasn't what I was expecting from two of the super giants of the writing world. The payoff is worth it, as we both discussed, and I think we both decided. But if I'm recommending this, go into it knowing it gets worse before it gets better. And there's and then it just know that that it'll be worth it near the end, and you just have to wait and see, right? Yeah.
All right, Ryan, I think we got to wrap up. I think that's pretty much all the time we have. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. Take good care, guys.
That was Ryan Hooey. He's a regular contributor to the show, and we were reviewing Eruption by Michael Crichton and James Patterson. That's all the time we have for AMI today. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski. Thanks for listening.